never forget the day I stepped onto the Titanic. She was a floating palace, towering over the docks at Southampton, her gleaming white hull shimmering in the crisp morning light. As I climbed the gangway, my heart raced with excitement. I was 25, a newlywed, embarking on the grandest adventure of my life with my husband, Charles. We were bound for America to start fresh, with dreams bigger than the ocean itself. The ship was everything they promised and more. Even in second class, the accommodations felt luxurious. Polished wood paneling, plush carpets, and the most delightful meals: roast duck, creamy soups, and desserts that melted on your tongue. Each evening, Charles and I would stroll along the promenade deck, breathing in the salty sea air. I marveled at the first class passengers in their elegant gowns and tailored suits, as if they had stepped straight out of a storybook. I felt a pang of envy, but only briefly. I was on the Titanic, after all, and that was enough. The days passed in a whirl of activity, meeting other travelers, playing cards in the lounge, and sneaking up to catch a glimpse of the grand staircase in first class. It was breathtaking, with its sweeping curves and ornate clock at the top, as if time itself paused to admire its beauty. Then came that night, April 14th, 1912. The air was bitterly cold, but the sky was clear. Stars scattered like diamonds across a velvet sky. Charles and I had just returned from a lively dinner and were settling into our cabin. I remember the faint jolt, so slight it could have been someone dropping a trunk. Curious, Charles went to investigate, but returned with nothing alarming, just whispers about an iceberg. It wasn't until the engine stopped that unease crept in. People began stepping out into the hallways, murmuring questions. We decided to go up to the deck. The icy wind bit my cheeks as we joined the growing crowd. The iceberg loomed in the distance, eerily silent. Crew members hurried about, assuring everyone there was no danger, but their faces told a different story. When the lifeboats began to swing out, the gravity of the situation sank in. I clung to Charles as the crowd grew restless. "Women and children first," the officers shouted. It was chaos. Families torn apart, husbands kissing their wives goodbye, some refusing to leave their loved ones behind. Charles cupped my face, his blue eyes steady despite the panic around us. "You have to go," he said firmly. I shook my head, tears streaming, but he lifted me into the lifeboat before I could protest, promising, "I'll find you in New York." As the lifeboat was lowered, I reached out for him, my voice hoarse from screaming his name. The icy water glistened below, and the reality of what was happening struck like a hammer. From the lifeboat, I watched the Titanic tilt ever so slightly, her bow dipping further into the Atlantic. The lights flickered, then steadied, casting a haunting glow on the hundreds still aboard. The ship's orchestra began to play, a hymn faint but steady. It was both a comfort and a heartbreak. As the bow plunged deeper, the stern rose high into the night sky. I'll never forget the sound, the groaning of metal, the shouts and cries of those left behind, and finally, the deafening roar as the Titanic broke in two. We drifted, helpless in the lifeboat, the freezing air biting through our clothes. The water was littered with debris, chairs, life belts, and lifeless figures. I searched desperately for Charles among the chaos, but he was nowhere to be found. Hours later, the RMS Carpathia arrived, its lights cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. I was pulled shivering and numb, my heart shattered. Charles never made it to New York. Now, when I close my eyes, I can still see the Titanic as she was in those first golden days. Majestic, proud, and full of life. And I remember the people, their faces etched with hope, joy, and in the end, courage. The Titanic may have sunk, but the stories of those who sailed her live on. I tell mine not with sorrow, but with a heart full of gratitude for the time I had, both on that magnificent ship and with the man I loved.